Good morning to one half of the greatest group of people in Michigan. I can no longer say in all the world anymore because I'll get in trouble because this is online. But it's just, I just can't express how overjoyed we are to be here. It's coming home, and we're so grateful for the opportunity to come. I will say, though, that my heart is a little bit torn with emotion, to be serious for a minute. Because, the Apostle Paul never really understood it before, but the Apostle Paul was talking to people like those in Corinth who he had labored with and he loved as his beloved children. He says he loved them, he taught them, but then when he left, they had gone astray and they had started to teach error and they'd done crazy things, and you can hear his heart poured out to them because he loved them. And then you see like Moses, who he leaves them to go up on the mountain to receive the law of Moses, and yet when he comes back, they built this golden calf and his heart's just broken. Can I leave you for a little bit? And I never understood that in 30 years of preaching until finally I come back to a church that I loved and I cared for and I poured my heart into, and I tried to preach them truth, and I come back and they've gotten rid of the communion table and built an altar. Seriously, I am overjoyed to be here and to be home. I want to thank Dan. I want to thank the shepherds. We got a new shepherd back there. He told me not to make any more jokes about him looking more elderly than before. That's the last one, I promise. Except for second service. Last one before second service. And Tad, thank you so much. And you're doing such a wonderful job here. I watched several of you said you've watched some of my sermons from West Main, and I watched them here, and you're doing such a wonderful job and appreciate it so much. I would like to give you a little word of advice. After being here for a number of years, these are just things that nobody else can tell you except the previous preacher. The first is, under no circumstances do you promise to wear any tie that a member buys you. Under no circumstances. Number two is, no matter how much it may be true or how much it looks like it, don't ever call anything Lila Ball cooks a hot pocket. And number three, and this is the key one. Okay, you've got it. I would go ahead and write this one down. No matter how much you're tempted to, no matter how much you think it might build your relationships, under no circumstances, agree to go ice fishing with an elder. Those are the three cardinal rules of being the preacher here. So, all right, we are talking about an attitude of gratitude, and this is going to be kind of easy for me to address because I'm so grateful to be here. So grateful for so many things in my life and the journey that it's taken Lenore and I on, but especially the stop that we had here in the frigid north with the warmest people, that some of them that we've known in all the world. But when it comes to gratitude, thanksgiving, we see so many examples of this. We're all grateful for a lot of different things. But I think when gratitude really shines the most is when you see the opposite. When you see a sense where people should be grateful and they don't. They don't express that. Every parent in here's had or will have that experience. I'm going to try not to trip over the altar here. But every parent's had that experience. You buy your kids things, and especially in our culture where we're fairly affluent and we've been able to provide them with so many things. And it's every parent's desire for their children to go farther and do more and have more than they had. The problem with that, though, is sometimes that doesn't produce one of the most important of all human virtues, which is gratitude. Because the more you have, the easier it is to take advantage of it. I remember when our kids were blessed to go to Mars Hill Bible School when they were growing up back in Alabama. But it being a private school, we were able to put our kids there because I taught a Bible class to get a teacher's discount, and I got a preacher's discount and all of those things, but we still had to tighten our belts so the kids could get that good Christian education. But some of those kids there, their parents, they were in private school. Their parents didn't need to buckle down their belt. So I remember having some students, 16 years old, new Jag, that I wouldn't get in because I'd be afraid of what diseases I'd get to crawl in the passenger seat of some of those kids' cars. I mean, their parents give them a $50,000 car, and they spill milkshakes in it and just treat it like a garbage can. And it always amazed me, and I remember saying to my kids, I said, we won't be able to afford you that kind of car, but you better treat it better than they do, no matter what we get you. Because I just couldn't fathom. Growing up with very little, close to nothing, to me, for a child to be given something like that and then to not appreciate it, right? To abuse it. It is so disconcerting, so upsetting when you see such a lack of gratitude. When we live in a culture, and I say culture, and I mean everything's changed in the last year, and I know y'all have weathered that storm well, but that this world that we live in, gratitude is not high on folks' priority list. Because the thing is this lesson has been entitled An Attitude of Gratitude, and gratitude affects your attitude. It does. Gratitude determines how you see everything else in the world. It colors like lenses through which you see everything else. It colors the way that it impacts you and the way that you respond to other circumstances. So if we think about that lack of gratitude that's so ugly, what does it look like? What does the attitude appear to be when a person is truly a grateful person? When they truly want to express to God and to even those on this earth who've been good to them, that one of the highest of human virtues of gratitude. What does that look like? Well, I think the first thing you notice about that attitude is it's an attitude that does not complain. It's not an attitude of complaint. And really, we can all check ourselves. And this lesson really is to everybody. I mean, if there was a mirror here, it'd be appropriate as well. Because we complain. We live in the culture of complaining because we call it our rights. Nobody's going to take away my right to complain. And really what it really means is no one's going to take away my right not to be grateful for everything God's given me in my life. Because that's what it comes down to, right? Because when I grumble, well, I got to do this, why do people do me that way? Or, I mean, today we could find a lot to complain about, right? When I grumble about, I got to sit 6 feet from the people I love, or I got to wear that silly suffocator so I don't have to be on a ventilator. That's how I say it. And the asthma issue, I hate that thing. But, when we complain, no matter what we're complaining about, folks, what we're forgetting is, I'm alive. What we're forgetting is we're still coming to church. What we're forgetting is there's people that I love in my life. My kids are okay. What we're forgetting, you see what I mean? Every complaint we have, there's 50 blessings we forget in that moment. And you see, when we are a people who complain, it means that we're focusing more on the things we feel we don't have than the things that we do. And that's not an attitude of gratitude. You see, this wonderful gift, in the face of such a wonderful gift that God has given to us, life's little annoyances, they shouldn't really matter anymore. It's amazing to me the things that we are tempted. And I say we. This is not just directed at you. I do it too. Because I forget sometimes. And the things that we grumble about in comparison to the gifts that we've been given. It's amazing to me the capacity human beings have to complain. I watched a program one time about people who won the lottery, and their biggest gripe was about taxes. I mean, you win $2 million. Sure, I don't want to pay, $700,000 in taxes. But I'd take the 1.3 that was left over. It's amazing. Isn't that shocking? Like, because you earned that money, right? Why should you have to pay taxes on it? It's just unbelievable. And I'm not making a political statement about taxes. I'm simply making a point. Isn't that amazing? But people do that all the time. I mean, get their dream job and then gripe about it. I thought, I didn't realize it was going to be like this. In every area of life. And what I want you to see above all else is that when we have that, what we're doing is we're accentuating the little annoyances and we're ignoring. In fact, sometimes we're spitting on the good things that we've been given. Look in Job. This is a story that we're so familiar with, but when you really get down to the nitty-gritty of the details, it's quite intriguing because Job, we talk about his great faith and how God rewarded him, and that's true, but he was a man. And he was a man who went through a lot, and we don't want to diminish the difficulties that he faced, but we have to be honest about that. He didn't face them perfectly. He didn't. Because we read things like Job chapter 7, verse 11. Therefore, I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. I'm going to complain. And he does. To God. Now, to his credit, he stays faithful. But he does complain. And then we look over in chapter 10, just a page over, chapter 10 and verse 1, and Job says this, my soul loathes my life. There's nothing that one who loves another wants to hear less than, I hate my life. If you've ever had a kid in their emotions say that, it just tears your heart out as a parent who loves them. So Job's going through a lot. It's a test. But now he says to God, I loathe my life. I hate my life. And I will give free course to my complaint, and I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. And the thing is, folks, is it's good and right to praise Job because Job never turned away from God. And that is correct, and that is noble, and that is true. But he was not perfect because we know another one who went through just as much as him, who had every ounce of flesh scourged from his back and had nails driven into his hands and his feet, and who on that cross, when he needed him the most, cried out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, and his father, for the first time in eternity, separated from him. And he could have called 10,000 angels with just one word, Michael, and he whispered the word. The gates of heaven would have opened, and the chariots of fire would have flooded and slew all the Romans in the righteous indignation of heaven. But he died alone for you and me without complaint on his lips. So Job was a good man in that he endured it. But God does respond to his complaints. Job 38. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. And he said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now prepare yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you will answer me. This is called a come to Jesus meeting. Or this is when a father says, son, who do you think you are? And then God's going to ask him questions. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me. Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined the measurements? Who surveyed? Surely you know. Listen to the sarcasm. God can be sarcastic. Well, surely you know. And he goes on and on and on. And this is a check. You realize what this is? What are you? I know that you're hurting. And God didn't want to dismiss that. But he's asking him, who do you think you are to complain to me? We've had that conversation. I told you before about the conversation Seth and I had to have. Serious come to Jesus meeting, because you know how that boy eats. And he could get a little selfish with the French fries. When Dad ran out of French fries first, it's only right if I want to reach across the table and have one, then that's a dad's prerogative. Just shaking your head. It is. I believe that it is. So this conversation happened. I don't remember, 11, 12, 13, I don't remember, but we both had our meal and our fries. I ran out, so I reached across the table, and he did one of these numbers. You know? And I'm like, Seth, I would like one of your fries. They're my fries. I said, now we need to have a conversation. There's 3 things you need to realize here. Number 1, I don't need your fries, because I have a friend called Visa, and I can go up to the counter and have all the fries I want. I don't need your fries. Number 2, you wouldn't have those fries if it wasn't for me. Now he's starting to soften a little bit on this. But then what really broke him down was, number 3, if I decide for the rest of your life until you leave my house, I could decide that you will never have a French fry again. Or I could flood you, son, with so many French fries you couldn't eat them all. Now, do you understand the point of this conversation? You see, he was complaining rather than realizing where the source of his blessings come. Our God deserves to be treated with gratitude. He deserves to have a people who aren't complainers. And when we start to, we catch ourselves. Sorry, Lord. I've been given too much. My wife's too pretty. My kids are too smart. I have too many good things in my life. I have brethren who love me. Lord, why would I grumble? Why would I complain? The thankful, the grateful do not complain. The second thing is that the thankful, the grateful, they focus upon what they've been given rather than what they don't have. That is the meaning of contentment, folks. There's nothing wrong with having more. There's nothing wrong with saying, well, maybe one day I'll have that and I'd like that. That's not what it means to be discontent. To be discontent is to believe that having something else will make your state of being better than it currently is. In other words, having something else will make me happy. If you do, here's the guarantee: it will not. Because there's always something more. There's always a car that's faster. There's always a house that's bigger. There's always a job that pays more. Grateful people don't focus on what they don't have. They focus on the beautiful nature of what they do have. It's impossible to count your blessings while you're adding up your neighbor's blessing. Isn't it? You see, it's a question really of contentment. Look over in Philippians. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. Now, the last part of this is going to be a text that we're very familiar with. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But you know, we tend not to look at context. We pull that verse out. You know, while I'm facing sickness, sister, brother, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Or, you know, as a church, we need to grow. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And those are all kind of secondary applications because the principle's true. But he's not talking about some non-specific, some just principle here. It's in the midst of a context. And what he's talking about here starts in verse 10. I rejoice in the Lord greatly. Now, at last, your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did not care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned that whatever state I am in, I've learned to be content. I know how to be abased. I know how to have bound. Everywhere and in all things I have Learn both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And it's in that context, he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That most quoted of verses in the New Testament is about that we can, because it's hard for people to do, because the devil uses discontentment all the time in all of our lives. He says we can do it through Christ who strengthens us. We can be a people who learn how to not complain and learn how to be content, who learn how to love our lives and love the things that he's given us and count our blessings instead of counting our neighbors. He says, but we can only do it if we're focused on him who strengthens us, who gives us that ability. And over in Hebrews chapter 13, 5 and 6, you remember this. The Hebrew writer says, let your conduct be without covetousness and be content with such things as you have. He says, be content. But how are we able to do that? What's the attitude? What's that which we focus upon that allows us to be content with whatever we have or whatever we don't have? He says this, be content with what you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do unto me? That context is about being content. And the source of our contentment is to know we have something that our neighbor can't have without Jesus. That no one else in the world can have such a precious gift. That no matter where I go, no matter what valley of the shadow of death I walk through, no matter as it touched me yesterday at the funeral for a dear brother when that old poem that is so well known and so read about footsteps in the sand, but it still continues to be read after all these years because it communicates this most sublime of all blessings. That he will never leave me or forsake me. So it doesn't matter what car I drive. It doesn't matter what house I live in. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. And it doesn't matter what happens in the election next week. Doesn't matter. Because no matter what, he will never leave me or you. He will never forsake us. So we can be content. We can be grateful. Which leads us to the final point I'd like to share with you, and that is number 3. The grateful always appreciate the value of the gift. Imagine an extremely sentimental and valuable gift. How would you care for it? For me, y'all know that if I'm not studying or playing with my grandson, I've usually got a guitar in my hand. And the one I love to play the most is the one my grandpa gave me. That guitar was the only thing of value he had in this whole world. My grandpa died with $200 in his bank account, and they sold his house for $13,000. His house. He had nothing in this world, but he didn't know anybody. He had nothing in this world, and 2 or 3 years before he died, I was there visiting, being the only grandson that played the guitar. He pulled that 1952 Martin D28 out from under his, that he traded an alternator for in the late 50s. Not knowing it was anything more than a guitar, but now it's the most coveted, one of the most coveted of all, worth as much as his house was worth when they sold it. He pulled it out from under there and he said, I just don't want folks fighting over this when I'm gone. Son, I want you to have it. I bought it a plane ticket going home. I paid for a seat for a guitar. That if you opened up the case and had looked at it, it's been repaired now, but if you'd looked at it, it just looked like something you'd get for $5 at a yard sale. But I paid for a seat for it. And I've repaired it. And I treasure it. And just the other day, my grandson was coming over who, that's one thing I love more than that guitar, I can tell you. But still, I put it away because I didn't want the little man to bump it or knock it over. And I've told Seth, someday this will be your son, but no matter what, you can't ever sell it. Can't ever sell it. Because it has value beyond whatever someone's willing to give you for it. That's the nature of a precious and priceless gift. That's why in Matthew chapter 13, we see this very short but profound parable starting in verse 45, where it says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking beautiful pearls. And when he had found one pearl of great price, he went and he sold all that he had and he bought it. What do you think? How do you think he treated that pearl that he sold everything to possess? You see, he realized the value. When we complain, when we're bitter, when we show a lack of gratitude, do we forget the value of what we've been given? I don't know if you saw the movie or read the book, but The Count of Monte Cristo is one of literature's great classics. And in the story we have Edmond Dantes, who's the kind of the protagonist in the story, and he is the one who gets wrongly imprisoned by his best friend and thrown in this terrible prison, and he is befriended by an old man who had been kind of a vizier of a king, and he knew all sorts of things about finance and about warfare, and in their friendship for years and years, he taught him everything he knew. Finally, when the old man dies, Dante, he escapes. And he washes up on the seashore right after he's set free, and it just so happens the very place that he washes up on the beach, there's a pirate crew. And they're about to put one of their members to death for stealing from his fellow pirates. And they say, oh, opportunity has fallen in our lap. And so they basically set up a fight to the death between Dante and Jacoba, this other pirate. And as they fight, Dante, he has been training every day with this old man who was an expert swordsman for years, and he quickly overpowers Jacoba, puts the knife to his throat, and then he whispers in his ear, he said, you just follow my lead. And he cries out to the other pirates. He says, I've taken his life, but can I spare his life? And he does spare his life. But after that happens, Jacoba leans in, and this is pretty early on in the story. For the rest of the story, Jacoba's with him through all of the terrible revenge, and then finally the redemption that takes place at the end. He's right there with him, be it his servant or his doorman or his driver. No matter what is asked of him, Jacoba does it. Sometimes he even advises Dante, and he says, I don't think this is the right thing, but if you tell me to do it, I'll do it no matter what. Because in that moment when he saved his life from certain death, he leaned up and he whispered in Dante's ear, he says, you have spared me, and I am your man forever. You see, that's what it means to devote ourselves in gratitude. We are his men and women because he saved every one of us from certain death. There is no room for complaint. All we can do, we can never, I've heard people say, well, how would we ever live up to such grace? And indeed, in Philippians 1, he says, live your lives worthy of the gospel. We can't do that. Nobody in here is ever going to be worthy of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, but what we can do is live a life that is absolutely defined by gratitude, because the only appropriate response to grace is a life of gratitude. Perhaps someone here today, I don't know a better-hearted group of people in the world than sitting here today. Perhaps someone here today, when you think about your attitude of gratitude, maybe you need to do some self-reflecting. Maybe with all the craziness in the world, you've become, rather than a grateful servant, maybe you've become a complainer. If you need to make any change today, I don't know of a group that would be more supportive than this one. And there is no other who would be more forgiving than that. If you come right now as we stand.